Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Yeehaw, boys and girls. It's Monday morning and time for another podcast. Another exciting podcast about model railroading and all the people in it. That's my favorite part, is talking to all the different people. And today, on this Monday morning, it's early morning. And as you drive on that long, lonely commute from Green Bay, Wisconsin, over the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, to Oconomowoc with your conductor sleeping beside you, or you're driving that into Boston, into downtown Boston from Hanover, Massachusetts, in that beautiful, beautiful Volkswagen diesel station wagon, getting 87 miles to the gallon, doing 0 to 60 in just under 5 minutes, or you're hustling your way into Philadelphia to run the insurance world and pick up your subscriptions at CVS. Regardless of where you are, you might have just returned from North America. You're in southern England, not far from London. You've returned from North America. You were the star of a meet and greet at a picnic in Rochelle, Illinois, signed hundreds of autographs, took hundreds of photos, made all kinds of new fans. You might be that guy, just getting ready to go tooling around to different clients. Regardless of where you are in this world, whether you're Rod Deary, working what road does Rod Deary work on? He runs a grader out there west of Perth, Australia, a couple hundred miles west of Perth, Australia. What road is that, Rod? Where do you live, Rod? We need to know where you live. Anyways, it's Monday morning. We have another show for you. It's All-Star Variety Hour number 6. And this week we have two familiar voices. Adam Pinales, our all-star Amtrak conductor. By now he may have applied to be an engineer, to go back into the cab. He does have very extensive locomotive experience as a locomotive engineer with the Utah Railroad as a young lad. And then he eventually ended up as a Amtrak conductor on the California Zephyr, which he really enjoys. He really enjoys meeting the people, but he's thinking about climbing back into the cab. Also, we have our very own Chris Fitness. Chris Adams, AML's official fit guy. And he holds that title very well, and he is respectful of his title. Chris Fitness, AML fit guy on patrol. Anyways, him and his lovely wife and his friend Bill Schneider from Rapido, they took a ride on the Rail Explorers on Rhode Island. It's this company that has locations in, don't tell me, they do rail exploring in Rhode Island, they do rail exploring in Las Vegas, and they also do it in the Catskill Mountains. And it's like you can rent a two-man, there's these little steel carts that you go on. Well, Chris will tell us all about it. So that's what we got. We got Adam Pinales for about 30 minutes telling us all about everything that he's doing. That boy wears me out. I had recorded this some time ago, and I thought I'm going to put it out there so we can hear more stuff about what Adam is doing. And then I talked to Chris Adams about his Chris Fitness. Talked to him about his fun day he had doing the Rail Explorers on Rhode Island, which I thought he would just go around it, but apparently he didn't. Look at that. I've been talking for 4 minutes. One more message. The thing to remember when you're listening to the AML podcast is that we are hungry for knowledge and shrimp. That little gem was given to us by little Mike Wachowski, also from Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. That's it. Subway chime. Go. Okay, now we're talking to Adam Pinales because we sent him a microphone, and you're at your romper room.
In the romper room.
Those are your daughters.
My daughters are all over the place. Got lots of them.
How many you got? You only got 2, don't you?
It's a good question. Let's see. I got Peyton, Shelby. I got 3.
Well, you got 3 daughters?
I got 3 daughters.
What are their ages?
That's another good question. Peyton, how old are you? 14, 13, and 6.
Okay. All right. 14, 13, and then you took a break for a while.
Yeah, well, no, Mason's in between that. So Mason's 11.
So how many kids do you have with your wife, Sherry?
Jenny?
Jenny. Yeah.
I don't know Sherry. Do you know Sherry?
No, I don't know Sherry. That's somebody else.
Don't scare me like that.
How many kids do you have with your wife, Jenny?
1.
Oh, and then you got 3 kids from another marriage?
Yeah, Jenny brought Peyton. I brought Peyton and Mason, and then we had Shelby.
Oh, okay. I'm not even going to go there. I'm confused now. She brought Peyton, and you brought Peyton and Mason. So you both had a Peyton, or you?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, huh?
How many Peytons are in the house?
2. Well, actually, only 1 because Peyton is 14 and Peyton is 13.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Their names are that close together.
Yeah, T and D, touchdown.
You're a one-man. You know you're a one-man highlight reel, eh?
Yeah, but the problem is that freaking reel keeps skipping.
You are a friggin' one-man highlight reel. How's my truck coming?
It's coming. It's still down in Cedar City.
Yeah.
Guy hasn't called me.
Okay. So what's happening with your live stream? I was trying to tell some guys the other day about your live stream, and I was doing a terrible job. So you run on 7.5-inch gauge, 7.5-inch track, and if it was standard stuff that you were running on there, it'd be 1.5-inch gauge, right? Scale. But you're modeling 3 foot or narrow gauge, so it's actually 2.5-inch scale.
Yes.
Which makes the locomotives just that much bigger to ride on and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I was on the 1.5-inch scale stuff, I'd look like Donkey Kong in Mario Kart.
Well, how tall are you?
6'3".
Okay. So you're a large man. You're a largest, but you don't stand out in a crowd though.
I don't know. My wife can always find me. I can never find her.
All right. So what's happening with the live stream? You're building it around have you actually got the track around your yard done?
I've only got the track in my driveway. And what's this? April 29th.
Right.
So as of April 29th, I have the entire grade down, all the subgrades down, pretty much graded. I've got the track through the driveway, and I'm getting ready I just poured the first footings for the first trestle, and I've got that lasered out and working on the grade down to the next bridge, because I figure those are the 2 most important pieces, and I have to measure all those or grade all those off of the elevation of the driveway. So it's been kind of between that and everything else, it's kind of gotten on the back burner because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it would be.
It's a lot of work.
You do it all yourself?
Pretty much. I've had one friend. My friend built the forms for the footings for the trestle, but aside from that, I've done everything myself.
Really? Eh? Well, I met these guys in Florida just a couple of weeks ago, and they're into live steam on 7.5-inch gauge track. But I posted a couple of pictures. The one guy is building shays.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that. That was awesome.
Oh my God! You ought to see what this guy's doing in his shop. And he's already got a Heisler built, and he's building 2 shays. And then these guys are both like really old guys, like in their 70s. I'm 65, but I'll never be old. These guys are like old guys in their 70s, and they got 7 acres, and they're laying out the track, they're doing the grading, they're doing it all. And I'm like, I look like I'm like a an invalid compared to these guys.
That's how the guys out west of me, they've got, I want to say they have 20 acres or so, and that guy has miles and miles of track, and they're all in their 70s, and they're all out there every Friday, just sitting there fixing track. I've gone out there a couple times. They want me to keep coming out, and I'm just like, man, I've got so much going. I'd love to come out and fix or help you guys fix the railroad, but I mean, it's only 40 minutes from me, but it's just hard to break away from all the projects I've got going. I think after the NMRA convention, I'll be able to like breathe a little easier, because I kind of signed myself up for a lot more than I thought I was going to be able to finish.
Right. And so now you're doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm just trying to scramble, and I'd probably be doing all right if I'd quit tearing up all my stuff. Every time I do something, I then think I can do it better and tear it up again.
Yeah, so that picture you posted today you posted a picture somewhere of Helix.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And was that the one you tore out?
Yeah, remember that picture I took of me inside the Helix?
Yeah.
That was the Helix. That's the same one.
And the reason that didn't work out is because you used too thin a plywood.
No, that one I took out because I wanted to decrease the radius so I could have more room for scenery.
Oh, okay.
Because the way the scene was composed, it didn't really fly the way I wanted it to. I would have ended up having too sheer of cliffs, and it wouldn't have looked right. So I decided, I can shrink the radius down a little bit and still have it operate pretty flawlessly, and I'd end up having a lot more room for scenery.
All right. And so that's what you did. So, but you weren't happy with the thickness of the plywood either, though, were you?
No, I really wasn't. Even though I'm still using that same thickness material, I'm just using an MDF, which is a little bit more durable. It takes to moisture a lot better.
Now, how come you don't just use a thicker plywood?
Because I'm trying to keep my grade to the point where I have a minimum amount of clearance in between each loop, So if I used a thicker plywood, I'd have to increase the grade to actually keep the clearance in between levels proper.
Okay, what kind of grade are you trying to stick to?
Just under 2.5%. It's like 2.2.
All right. I apologize. Spoon and Bruce, the mildly agitated mailboy, are in here making lunch. That's what all that noise is.
They're feeding each other. I can see them through the glass.
I know. It's embarrassing. I apologize.
It's all right.
But now that you're becoming a semi-regular here, you'll have to get used to all this sort of stuff.
I'm trying to. I'm trying to fit in. I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah. I think you need to use a thicker plywood and have a bit more of a grade or something. I don't understand why the grade would change that much with a thicker plywood. You're going to have to explain that one to me, because, okay, once the grade starts, it really wouldn't matter the thickness of the plywood?
It probably doesn't, but in my head it did. So when I was looking at it, it seemed like this didn't make sense. If I had a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, I'm going to have to actually, the grade will end up being steeper to clear it. But I mean, you're probably right.
Yeah, I don't see how it would end up being steeper. Just don't do too thin of stuff again, and you'll be right back in the same boat. You'll be tearing it out again.
It looks really good this time, though. I mean, this time I actually spent the money and had a CNC router cut out all my shapes, so I didn't have to cut them out. And then I used Unitrack, the Cato Unitrack, which when I hot glued that down, it ended up adding a lot more rigidity to
the whole thing. That would make sense.
Yeah, so it made it a lot nicer. So I was using masonite, the masonite material, or hardboard, I guess, depending on where you're from. Hardboard or masonite, and that stuff you can almost soak that stuff in water for a long period of time before it will actually start deforming. And then but it was having a hard time on the CNC cutter, so we switched to an MDF, which was actually a really it was a cabinet grade MDF, so it can take quite a bit of moisture as well before anything starts happening.
And who was doing it on a CNC machine for you?
I just found a I first tried to use the laser, but the laser ended up costing too much money to actually keep cutting. And the CNC machine, I ended up just Googling around to see who had one that could take a 4x8 sheet, and I ended up finding a sign shop that had one, and just hired them.
And they didn't give you too much. They weren't. And did they give you the what? What is it you're doing? Why are we cutting it?
Yeah, they're like, "What are you building?"
Yeah.
And I was like, just mind your own business. I'm paying you money. Just cut me this.
Yeah, just cut it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I tell you it's for a model railroad, there'll be a litany of other questions.
Yeah, you're gonna make fun of me and tease me because this is a dying hobby, and I don't want to. You can't believe you're putting that kind of money into this dying hobby, and I didn't want to fight the guy. I just wanted him to cut my wood and be done.
Mostly, I never worried about them saying it was a dying hobby. I just didn't want to have to explain to them what I was doing. So I would always be the same way. Just cut it. Just cut it.
Just cut it.
Yeah.
No, I ended up showing them. I showed them pictures of what I was doing and they thought it was pretty cool. So next thing I know, he's like, "Well, how did you get into this?" Oh boy, here we go. Well, I work for Amtrak. Oh, you work for Amtrak? Yeah. Sometimes.
I got something in the mail today that I can hardly wait to show you, but I'm not going to show you until it's ready.
Oh.
I got something really cool that I bought because of you. I bought this item.
Ooh.
But I don't want to tell you before I can show you.
Is it a beer stein?
No, I'm afraid not.
Oh, okay. Is it the Mr. Beer kit?
Yeah, Mr. Beer kit. That's what it is. It's a Mr. Beer kit. So all right. So are you going to have some of the layout done then for when because you're the NMRA convention's coming to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
You live in a place called Mapleton, Utah, which is just southeast of Provo, Utah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much just straight south. Yeah.
Okay. Straight south. And not how far, like 30, 40 miles south of Provo?
Oh, no, probably like 5 miles.
Okay. And how far is Provo from Salt Lake City?
About 30 or 35 miles.
Okay. So they're going to have buses coming down. And how many layouts are there in the Provo area?
On the day of my tour, there's actually a pretty good sized layout right down the road from my house. A fellow named Gil Rand, which is ironic because he's the guy that was partners with my dad in the original hobby store.
Really?
Yeah. He's the one that sold out and created the demise of the well-trained. So needless to say, I haven't been down there. Not necessarily because of that. Just like I said, I just kind of keep to myself. But yeah. So we're about 40 minutes. But as far as the layouts, I think he's on the same day. There's me. And I believe they're going to show the Soberg layout at Train Life.
Oh, yeah, right. And how far is Train Life is in Provo?
Yeah. So it's like, oh, man, I'm there almost every day. I can be there in about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So Train Life is part of Exact Rail.
So, yes, Train Life is right next door to Exact Rail, and it's kind of their own I'm going to say that they're separate entities, but they're in the same. They're of the same. But that's Train Life is a online hobby store,
and it's online, but they have a place you can go into.
Yeah, they have a brick and mortar,
but it's mostly online. And how do they seem to be doing? Like, do they like?
Oh man, they're slamming, man. Every time I'm in there, my little buddy Sean, he was not nonstop packing and shipping. So,
okay, I'm gonna look here and see if I can find it on the old Google. There it is, trainlife.com. It's at south in Provo, Utah, and it sells but it sells everything. But it's a division of Exact Rail. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So it was started by and they sell HO and they sell all.
Yep. It's pretty much a full, as of right now, I know they're working on getting more like tools and that kind of stuff. They more consumable type materials for the hobby. But I pretty much get just about everything I do, everything I need from there.
Wow.
So I bought all my Unitrack from there that I rebuilt the whole railroad from. I've bought, I know I cleaned them out multiple times with Unitrack. Then they had to order more, and then they had a special order for me, and it was pretty cool. That's like super cool guys, and I would highly recommend everybody to check it out. At least check it out. I mean, their prices are as good as anybody's.
And it's trainlife.com. It couldn't be any simpler. Trainlife, LIFE.com. Couldn't be any simpler. And there's a picture here. They said, yes, we have a brick and mortar store. And there's a picture of it, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you just... So do you think model railroading is pretty popular in Provo?
You know, it's amazing because I was actually in the hobby store today, and I would say probably once or twice a week, somebody walks in that isn't in the hobby. They just found it. They just, stumbled across it, and they walk in and they're just kind of blown away. Like, wow, I didn't think there was this much stuff available. Yeah. What are you interested? What do you want to do? And it's kind of fun talking to these guys, try to get them all hyped up about doing something in the hobby and where their interest lies. Cause amazingly enough, seems like everybody on the planet has some sort of interest in trains, whether it's they're mad about being stopped at a crossing or they just really like it.
I know. I was just talking to a fella, Jeff Brigham, who I mentioned his name quite a bit, and I started wanting to talk to some people. So, this will probably put this on with that. And I just talked to him for like 40 minutes, and it's like, he's a 33-year-old guy, and he's just got, just interested in trains. And what dragged him back into the hobby after being a kid was the Blackstone models.
Oh yeah.
From Soundtracks, those guys. And
those little things almost got me back into HON3.
Yeah, well, they run so well, eh?
I'm still considering, because I have a little bit of HON3 equipment from back in the day, and I'm still considering just building a little layout, just a little circle, just to watch them go around,
You don't have time to do that. Let's go over everything that you're working on. You're building a layout. How big is your end scale layout?
That's a good question. I've never really measured it. It's 2 bedrooms, but the one room is pretty big. So I would say it's probably about 25 by 25 or so.
And do you have any place where you post pictures of it? You don't have a Facebook page for it or anything, do you?
Yeah. Facebook page is Soldier Summit and N Scale.
I'm going to look at that. I'm going to type that in now. This is the most exciting part of the show is where I'm typing. I think I remember you telling me that a couple of weeks ago. You know what the problem is? There are I talk to too many people and I can't remember everything. And and before that, I couldn't remember anything anyway. So it's just manifest.
just add an insult to injury.
Yeah. Soldier Summit in N Scale. Here it is. Pretty cool. All right.
And it's, my number one complaint is when I post my F scale stuff. That's not N scale. That's not N scale. I know it's predominantly I'm in N scale, but yes, I got just about a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's the same way you're doing it. The same way as the podcast. You're doing a little. You might as well post everything you're doing. What's this coaling tower I see? That's not N scale, is it?
No, see, that's F scale. That's 1 to 20,
which is what you got out in your yard.
Yeah, which is the small outdoor railroad.
So you got an N scale layout inside that we're guessing is about 20 by 25 by 25 or 20 by 25.
Yeah.
Then you got F scale. And how do they determine it's F scale?
Because it's freaking huge.
Is it bigger than G scale?
Yeah. So G scale. Well, here's the weird thing when it comes to the garden gauge, is you've got G gauge, which is 45 millimeter, which the most popular stuff in G gauge is your old LGB stuff. That's 1 to 22.5 scale. The proper size or scale for G gauge is 1 to 32 scale. The most popular stuff that's produced right now, or has been produced as of late, is 1 to 29 scale. So it's a little bit bigger than the 1 to 32 scale, and a lot of people do that just because it gives it that little bit of heft to it.
Right.
It looks cool. It looks cool. Then there's quarter inch scale, or is it quarter inch, or 1 to 24 scale? It's half inch scale. So it's 1 to 24 scale is also a kind of semi-popular. Everybody thought that was going to be the new thing, was the 1 to 24 scale. I always mix it up with quarter inch scale. Quarter inch scale is actually O scale, but 1 to 24 is close enough to a quarter. It seems like I get that mixed up.
Right.
But it's actually 1 to 24 scale. Was supposed to be the new narrow gauge of G gauge, but then all of a sudden 1 to 20.3 came out, and which is proper narrow gauge for 45 millimeter gauge.
Wow. So where does F scale fit in there?
F scale is the alphabetic designation for 1 to 20.
And how popular is it? How hard is it to find stuff for it?
Oh man, it's actually, it goes in waves, man. It was really, really popular during, I'd say, the early 2000s. I mean, they're one of the big producers, Accuraft. They produced a lot of brass locomotives. They made a killing, man. They did really, really well. The stuff is really expensive. They did pretty much everything that's been produced or that was available in narrow gauge, all the Rio Grande stuff. They had a spin-off called AMS, American Scale Models. I think that's what they call AMS. I don't know what it actually meant, but
right.
That did plastic freight cars in 1 to 20 scale, and for pretty much all the Rio Grande narrow gauge stuff. And then all of a sudden Bachmann Spectrum jumped into it. They came out with the Shea, then they did a Climax, then they did a like an American little 440, and then a Mogul. So they produced a bunch of stuff in the 1 to 20 scale, and it's funny. It got really, really popular. It was like a big explosion. The economy crash as of late 2000, 2008 or so, everything kind of died off, and it kind of disappeared. It almost died. Like it literally just went away. Nobody produced anything. Nothing came out. And even now, nothing really has come out in 1 to 20 scale for quite a long time. And pretty much everything that you find for sale is either new old stock that a store had, or an estate sale that somebody's liquidating all their stuff. Or, because it was expensive enough that pretty much just old guys could afford it,
Right.
Locomotives were $3,000,
Yeah, exactly. And what was the company you said that was making stuff?
Accuraft.
And are they still around?
They are still around, and I can't believe they are, because they're really not doing a whole lot of stuff. They have done a lot of European stuff. Like the large scale is really, really, really big. Well, all the model railroading is really big in the overseas.
Yeah.
But the large scale garden stuff is huge over there. So there's a lot of product produced for them. What's cool about the 1 to 20 stuff is Accuraft also did the same models. Either you could buy them either electric or in live steam.
Really?
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. The live steam ones were about double the price.
And you were saying about the Shea. Who built the giant Shea? Who was it? The Bachmann built the Shea?
Yeah, Bachmann did the Shea, yeah.
I wonder can you still, I guess you can find them on eBay occasionally too. I remember.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can get them.
I remember walking by them thinking, now that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
The Bachmann Shea kind of, that big Bachmann Shea kind of got me all cranked up, I'll tell you.
Yeah. I got into the 1 to 20 scale back in, it was about 2000, right when it was getting big. And because me and my dad, we got contracted to rebuild a big, huge outdoor railroad up at, it's pretty much right between here and Salt Lake. There's a little place called Thanksgiving Point. It's like an outdoor garden, big, massive place. And they had a huge children's museum with a really, really big outdoor railroad that they put in that didn't work the guys that put it in didn't really know what they were doing. So me and my dad actually went out there and rebuilt the thing for them. And in doing so, kind of got us hooked in that gauge. It got us kind of really pumped up in that scale because it was pretty fun to work with.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? No kidding.
And right then, it was the same time as the National Narrow Gauge Convention it was when they had their convention in 2001. So we were a pretty big feature on the tours that they had. And it was cool because we got to meet all the manufacturers, and we ended up meeting with the guys at Bachman, and they completely sponsored us. So it was all of a sudden one day we had a whole pallet full of locomotives show up. Shays. It was, I mean, when I say a pallet full, I'm not kidding. It was as tall as I was, and I think we had 5 of each.
Wow.
It was impressive.
And what was the name of the place again?
The place was called Thanksgiving Point. And it's kind of a race to history. They don't really have, it's still there, but the railroad's not. And the Children's Museum is now like a big discovery museum. They keep talking about wanting to put another layout type thing in, but they never actually do it. They do have a train show there once a year, usually in January. But aside from that, that's about it.
All right. And then you got your 7.5-inch gauge on top of that. And for that, you're building locomotives, you and another guy.
Yeah. In fact, I just barely yesterday got all the shipping arranged for another locomotive kit to come out to me.
Do you ever sleep, or what's the deal?
I do all the time.
Maybe that's where I'm missing. Maybe I'm not sleeping enough or something.
I'm actually asleep right now.
Oh yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. It sounded like you're a step and a half behind. And then on top of that, I'm going to tell everybody right now, you build hot rods.
I've been known to build a few.
You've been known to build a few hot rods, and about 6 or 7 weeks ago, you were throwing. There's a bunch of us that hang out, and you posted a picture of what year Chevy truck was that?
It was an 84.
An 84 Chevy that you'd done up really nice, and then you said you sold it for $15,000. And all I could think to myself is, holy smokes, if he can do something like that for around $15,000, I'm all over that.
Yeah, it was kind of a lucky deal. Like, I lucked into it. The truck was pretty well, it was close to done. It just needed paint and a few detail things. And I saw a financial opportunity because I'm not a Chevy guy at all.
No.
But I saw a financial opportunity to make some money on it. So I jumped on it.
So now you're gonna see if you can find a Ford F-150 flare side, 1967.
And how ironic was it that I found one out back of a Dairy Queen?
Yeah. Like 2 days later.
Right. Isn't that weird?
It is. It's a message. It's a message from God.
That's what I said. That's why I texted you. And I was like, this must be a sign.
Yeah, it has to be. This is like a message from God.
Yeah.
All right. We've been talking for 30 minutes. We're going to stop now.
Oh, okay.
That's it, man. We're going to stop. I'm probably going to put this with Jeff Brigham. And so we just made a show. I talked to you and I talked to Jeff Brigham and made a show.
Huh.
Perfect. Now you'll be able to listen to yourself. And I apologize.
Somebody's doing something around here.
And I apologize that Mike and Spoon and the moderately agitated mailboy were making so much noise.
That's all right. I'll get after him next time I see him.
I can't. And also on this trainlife.com, they have a 6-part video series about saving Paley Solberg's layout.
What a cool story that really is, man. Like one of my really good friends is Chris Brimley, who's, pretty much the head honcho of the place over there. And I got to hang out. I hang out with him quite often. In fact, he came to Grand Junction with me 2 weeks ago. Me and him he came to work with me. So
right. Yeah. He rode along. Yeah.
Yeah. He come with me to hang out with him for the weekend and, just sat there and we didn't even do anything. We just sat around and talked the whole time. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But listening to the whole story of why and how and the dynamics of shipping a model railroad from where's it come from? Poland?
Sweden, I think.
Sweden.
Yeah.
I'm obviously way off, but it came from a long way away. It traveled by boat and train, and it was fun because I remember once it hit the mainland, the container was loaded onto an intermodal train, and we were able to track it all the way across the country till it got dropped off in Salt Lake City.
I'm gonna have to see if I can find any photos of it somewhere.
Yeah.
Done. All right, that's it. Now I'm stopping talking right now. Get that
done.
Get out of here. Bye. Goodbye.
Later.
I hit the button.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And now this is just, I don't know what this is. It's a segment of something. It's just some talking because my buddy Chris Adams was out riding one of those rail cars, those pedal rail cars, and I thought that would really be cool to talk about. So he's here now. Chris Adams.
Hello.
Stand up and take a bow.
Where's the applause?
Yeah. That comes in later.
Oh, okay. You'll have to edit that in.
Yeah, no, it depends on how interesting you are. Yeah, so if you just heard a lot of applause, that means the people love to hear from you.
And otherwise, okay.
Yeah. So you went on. So Chris Adams lives in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, which is about 45 minutes from Hartford, Connecticut, south.
Yes.
And Hartford, Connecticut is north of Boston, which is north of New York, which is. But you live right on the coast, like on the water, like not on the water, but your town is on the water.
Nearby, yeah. Our place is about probably about 2 miles away from the water, so it's far enough away not to flood or be too expensive.
So what body of water is that? Because is that the water that's between Connecticut and Long Island?
Yes, Long Island Sound, and but we also have water going up the east side of town. The Connecticut River empties out into the Sound right there.
Okay, isn't the Long Island Sound where they're seeing sharks this week?
Oh, yeah. I guess there was one at the west end of Long Island Sound. At least that's what I heard on the news. But yeah, I haven't seen any sharks myself.
Yeah, and really, how many do you need? You really only need one to do the job.
That's true. Yeah, one goes a long way.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Oh, yeah. Great movie.
It is.
Oh, kind of a funny aside, not to get off track, no pun intended, but just this last week at my day job, I work up at the legislature in Hartford, and we passed a bill on banning shark fins. I guess shark fin soup and that sort of thing. And, reasonable minds can differ whether that's a good idea or not, but it seemed a little ridiculous because we don't really have a big shark fishing industry in Connecticut. But nevertheless, we did a shark fin bill, and after it passed, some clever person put up on the screen that we have where we show the votes when we take the votes. It put up on the screen the baby shark theme. right after the Jaws theme. So a little bit of levity. That's something you'd expect at 3 a.m., not at 3 in the afternoon. But somebody was feeling frisky, I guess.
So you made a bill where people can't kill sharks for just the fins?
Right.
Is that some sort of delicacy, is it?
Apparently. I don't really know much about it, but we didn't have anything. We've got a big budget we've got to pass, and we've only got about 8 more days to do it, and we're concentrating on banning shark fins. So I guess that's easier to do to get everybody on board than to try and come to an agreement on a budget.
Yeah. There's somebody out there that's got a lot of money that's pumping money into their whatever candidate, and they want shark fin soup.
Right. Well, then they didn't pay enough because that's what we banned. You won't be getting that soup anymore. That was a lobbying fail.
Here's what I'm thinking. This is only my own personal thought, but I think the world's going crazy.
It kind of is. It really is. I mean, that could be the subject of a whole other podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Could be the subject of this one. All right. So, anyways, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, from when we're talking, not necessarily from when this airs, but from when we're talking, you posted a picture of your morning ride, which this time was on one of those thingamajig. What was it?
A velocipede.
Yeah.
Well, they call it a rail bike, which is kind of funny because it has 4 wheels, so it should, I guess, be a rail quad. But yeah, it's a 4-wheel vehicle that is powered by pedals and a chain drive. And I guess I didn't have enough with regard to my bicycling in the morning and doing my morning rides on my bicycle, so I decided to do it on a railroad. But yeah, they come in either 2-seater or 4-seater configurations, and we got a 4-seater with our Debbie and I went with our friends Bill and Teresa, and yeah, it's been something we've been wanting to do for a while, but schedules hadn't been working out, and we finally did it. And you have to book them a fair good amount in advance, and we really lucked out with the weather because they go rain or shine, and it was a picture perfect day that day, and really had a really good time.
So this goes on like abandoned rail somewhere.
Either abandoned or semi-working. This particular stretch is part of the Newport Narragansett Bay Railroad. It's a little tourist line. They do a dinner train on a stretch of rail that goes. It's all on Aquidneck Island. Aquidneck Island is one of the islands in Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island, believe it or not. And Newport is probably what most people know Aquidneck Island about, because Newport is the town at the south end of that island. And so at the north end of the island is the town of Portsmouth. And the rail line to Newport went from Portsmouth at the north end of the island down the west side to Newport. And a portion of it now is used for this Rail Explorer thing, and also the dinner train. The rail itself is well, I was going to say landlocked, but I guess it's on an island.
Yeah.
But the bridge from Aquidneck Island to the mainland was severed back in I think in the 1980s. So ever since then, that rail line hasn't been connected to any of the national rail network, and it's been kind of out on its own.
Aquidneck Island, so I see Middletown and Portsmouth and
Yep.
Prudence Island and.
Yep. If you're seeing Middletown and Portsmouth and Newport, that's all on Aquidneck Island.
But there's no rail connection to Aquidneck Island.
Not any. Well, there's rail on it, but no rail connection at all any longer. There's a let's see. There was a bridge between Portsmouth and Tiverton, Rhode Island. Gosh, up until 80 something. That. To provide rail service down to Newport. Actually, it was kind of a neat line way back in the heyday in the 1890s. I mean, you'd have that line bringing in all private cars and everything for the Newport mansions. But yeah, I'm looking it up here, trying to figure out when. Saconet River. The Saconet River divides Aquidneck Island from the mainland, and there was a swing bridge across it that was damaged in 1980. So there hasn't been any rail service since then.
Oh, okay. All right. And what do they call that river again?
What do they call that river?
You just said it.
Yep, it's the Saconet. Saconet. Sakonet. All sorts of funny names up here.
Yeah, and at the south end of it is the Saconet River Shellfish Management Area.
Oh, okay. Well, you know more than I do.
Well, I'm just looking at Google Maps at this point.
Oh, there you go.
So how far does this rail line? So because it's a part of a bit of a working railroad, a tourist railroad, did you have to pull like an old PS1 40-foot boxcar?
We only downgrade. No, but they did actually, and I'll post some pictures. Actually, I could send you a bunch of pictures if you want to put them up on the on the page or whatever. But there were a couple 44 tonners. They weren't being operated that day, but took some pictures of some 44 tonners. They had some passenger equipment, I guess, that they used for the dinner train. But everything was off on side tracks. And when we arrived at the location, it's basically just a wide spot in the track, I guess. There's a passing track there and some sidings that the equipment was stored on. And then they've got this tiny little station. It almost looks like something you could put up on skids and load up onto a flatbed. But they had a tiny little station there for the Rail Explorers organization, and yeah, they had all the rail bikes, or rail quads, all lined up on the track, and with all the reservations and everything. So yeah, you have the whole railroad to yourself, and you go about 6 miles up. They do from that central point, they'll take a tour either north or south. And the one that we did that day was the one that went north. So it went north from the station up to the north end of the island. And they space you out about 500 feet. They give you a safety briefing at the beginning, give you some information about how to use the brake and not to bump into each other. You're supposed to maintain a big gap, and so they send you out every few minutes. They'll send another one out, so it'll maintain a big gap. And they have people that flag the crossings, so you can get through the crossing safely. And but there aren't that many crossings, and the track. It's no wonder that there's no equipment really, that heavy equipment that runs on it, because I know a few of the spots the track was in really rough shape. But for these rail bikes, it's no problem, and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful day, and you're going right along the west side of the island, so you see Narragansett Bay and the Mount Hope Bridge, which is a big suspension bridge, and flora and fauna, usual stuff. Rail clicks are kind of cool. Except my buddy Bill was on apparently on the wrong side of the track, because the rail joints on his side were a lot wider than the ones on my side, and there's no suspension on these things. So every time, those rail clicks, sound nice, but when you're sitting right above steel wheels, when you go over them, they can kind of be jarring.
So they're pretty neat carts, eh? I'm looking at them now. I mean, they look like they're in good shape and everything.
Yeah, so they're really cool. I mean, they almost look like I guess they are a pedal car. And yeah, it's four wheels and the chain drive mechanism, and you have a nice wide seat that you can adjust back and forth. You've got your pedals, there's a handbrake, and like I said, you can either get a dually with the 2 seats or the 4 seats. And in the little booklet that they give you, they have some examples of what the velocipedes or the Gandy dancers used to use back in the day. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with the old pump car, that has the 2 levers
Right.
and the 2 guys.
Yeah, that's the hand car. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they've got you may have seen rail bikes that are actual bicycles that just have an outrigger post or whatever that goes out to a wheel for the other rail. And so you're basically riding your bike on one rail, and then you've got the outrigger wheel on the other rail. So they've got, those have existed in the past, but these 4-wheeler ones are really, they're nice and stable, and, you can pedal them really easily. The gearing is good. You can get them going pretty fast. I'll just,
that's what I was wondering.
Leave that there, but you want to maintain the gap, so you don't want to get going too fast, because you inevitably have to slow down anyway.
So they're pretty easy to operate then?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought so. Of course, I ride my bike, so it's pedaling is a familiar exercise for me, and I also had 3 other people helping. So I think it might be a little bit different if I went to their other location. They have a location, I guess, in the Adirondacks, and same outfit. And if I were to go there by myself and just get a dually, I don't know if they pair you up with somebody, or you can just reserve it and do it by yourself. But I don't know if it'd be as easy with some grades and pedaling by yourself. It'd probably be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, so with 4 people on it, it's no real, like, the ladies didn't have to really strain. You didn't build up no, but you didn't get a good sweat going or nothing.
Right. No, well, Bill and I, every once in a while, we were kind of teasing them that they weren't really, they were just moving their feet, They weren't really pedaling, but every once in a while, we'd because we were gawking at the scenery, the gap in front of us would grow a bit, and we'd turn around, look behind us, and the gap was kind of closing in. It's like, okay, so Bill and I would just, start pedaling really hard. It's kind of funny. You can get some good acceleration on those things if you're trying hard enough.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it helped too that we were going a little bit downgrade, so that helped.
So do you only go one way, or do you pedal down and then you pedal back?
Yeah, it's just one way. So it was, that was I don't want to say surprising. I mean, I should have known, but I thought at the other end that we might be turning it around and coming back, and it actually ended up being good that we didn't, because by the time you go the 6 miles, it's not that you're worn out, but the prospect of turning these things around, and they weigh about 400 or 500 pounds. They're no slouch. I didn't get a picture of it, and I should have, but I'm told that they have a tiny little turntable that they turn these things on down a little bit further down the track from where we stopped. But yeah, they take care of turning the carts around and I guess sending them back. What you do though is you just go the one way, and when you get done, there's a one of these big charter buses That's really nice. It's got bathroom on it. It's all air conditioned and everything. And one of these big tour buses take you back to the start. And at that point, we were definitely ready for lunch. So
Yeah, so it takes about 2 hours.
yeah, about that.
Okay, and it's just an easy, nice, relaxing ride.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, one of the things that I've enjoyed about having a mountain bike and going on some of the rail trails is and you can do the rail trails on a road bike as well if they're paved. Is if I don't agree with taking either active rail or rail that could ever be active and ripping the rails out and making a trail out of it. Totally against that. That transportation infrastructure you don't get back. And again, that might be a subject for another podcast. Reasonable minds can differ, but
yeah, like if they were to take out the CSX main line between Albany.
Yeah, that would be kind of hilly.
Yeah.
Over Washington Summit on a pedal car.
Yeah,
but
just to have pedal cars. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But to have a section of railroad that's still intact that you can actually operate on. It's not unlike some of these guys. I know you had somebody on the show a few months back, I think, that has a speeder, and you've got these little speeder conventions or these speeder get-togethers where people bring their speeders and they can rent out a section of railroad for the day and take their speeders out on the railroad. It's kind of the same sort of thing where you're still keeping the rail line active. People still, the surrounding neighbors and stuff still acclimated to stuff being on the rails and moving, which is a good thing, to kind of keep the corridor alive. And maybe at some point, maybe it does become more active again. Maybe, some service comes back at some point in the future. But, once the rails are out, it's really tough to get that back. So this is another way of kind of preserving some activity on the existing rail infrastructure.
So what does it cost?
Let's see, what did it cost? I think it was about 60 for Devin. I think it was 60 something. So maybe $30 a piece, something like that.
Okay. And for the other people, it must have been the same price. Or do you think you got a deal?
Yeah. So yeah. So I think for the quad it was like 120, something like that, somewhere around there.
That's pretty good. That'd be a fun thing to do for $30 each.
Well, exactly. And the coolest thing is that even if you're not into railroads themselves or rail history, even if you're not a buff, I mean, to be able to go out and on a dedicated right of way, not have to worry about cars or anything, and going through backyards and sections of scenery that you wouldn't normally go through. I mean, one of the pictures I think I posted on the Facebook was going across one of the little bridges. We went across I think 3 little bridges, which were pretty cool, and lots of culverts and stuff. But going through some of the salt marshes, I mean, you're just out and it's amazing. There's nothing around you. You're on a right of way that doesn't see any other traffic right now, and you get some views that you can't get otherwise.
Yeah, just a fun thing to do and not overly priced. And it seems like they have right now. That particular company has 3 locations. They have Rhode Island, and then they have Las Vegas.
Oh, that's right, Las Vegas. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, and where's the other one? In the Catskills?
Yeah, and Adirondack Railroad, I think, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Somewhere out there.
I wonder how far that goes. Let's see.
Let's see. Yeah, they first opened in the summer of 2015 in the Adirondacks.
Nice.
That one may not be active now. I thought I had heard somewhere, and maybe it's different now, but some months back they had some complications with the Catskill Railroad and some stuff over there. So I'm not sure if they're still active over there or not. But the gal that got us set up, she was telling us a little bit about the business and everything. And apparently, it's not that they travel from place to place. I mean, this is a set thing that they do at this location. But during the off season, or what's the off season here, is they go out to Las Vegas. And they do this thing out in Las Vegas, and it's like, oh wow, that's actually kind of cool. It's like surfers. They always follow the waves. Following the weather.
And it's just is it like a husband and wife thing running this thing? Do you think, or
I don't know. It didn't seem to be. I mean, the folks that were there that day, I'd say, are in their 20s. 20s.
Yeah.
The oldest one was like 30. I mean, it looked like something. It certainly looked like they were having a really good time. It also looked like a great job for somebody, right out of college that maybe, majored in hospitality business or whatever. Maybe they're also interested in railroads and, want to get into the tourist and hospitality thing. It seemed like those kinds of, I was going to say kids, I guess I'm old now, but, these types of folks that are in their 20s that are doing that sort of thing. And, good vibe. And, they were certainly enthusiastic. Of course, the weather helped a lot. I guess they had done a tour the previous day when it had been raining, and I guess that can get kind of miserable for everybody. But they have umbrellas on these things, and I don't know if I want to look like Mary Poppins going down the railroad with my umbrella in the rain, but we didn't have to worry about that. It was so nice out.
It's pretty slick, and the cars are really nice. That's what gets to me.
Yeah, they're pretty substantially built. They've got fenders and I mean, they've got some mass to them. And that's one of the things in the safety briefing they were saying is that, you make sure you know where the brake is and know how to use it and keep far apart from each other, because these things, once you get them going, you've got a lot of momentum to them. So, just be mindful of that. You're not going to be able to stop on a dime. They weigh, like I said, they weigh about 400 or 500 pounds each. So.
And how were they to stop them? Was it hard, or you just pulled them?
No. There's just on the quad, the person that sits on the I guess on the engineer side, on the right side in the back is the one that operates the brake. And it just so happened that's where Deb was sitting. So what you're supposed to do, this was actually, well, you'd have to envision it. So I'll try to paint a word picture for you, right? So during the safety briefing, they tell you where the brake is. You have seatbelts. You have to have your seatbelt on, and you've got your brake. And so they give special instructions to the person that's sitting in the seat that has the brake. Okay, you got to make sure you want your most responsible person to sit in that seat. And whenever you use the brake, you got to put your hand up. You operate the brake with the left hand, and you put your right hand up. So I don't know why, but the first time that we were pedaling along and everything, and we were coming to a grade crossing, the flagman was there, and they told us the signals for when we can continue and when we need to stop because there's a car coming. And we get to this grade crossing, and the person kind of motions for us to stop. So Debbie applied the brake, and all four of us put our hands the people behind us were cracking up, even being so far back, it's just like, okay, at least there was no question that we were stopping. I mean, everybody's hands went up, so it looked like we were being held up or something.
I would have thought that the friction wouldn't have been as fun as riding a bike, but it sounds like it wasn't that hard to get it going.
No, not too hard at all. Like I said, I might feel differently if I were doing it all by myself, but yeah, with four people, it's you've seen tandem bikes. I guess it's the same sort of principle. You have more legs going and pushing on the pedals, and it's going to go pretty easy. I mean, and we all know, being railroaders, that steel wheel and steel rail is one of the most efficient things. There's not a lot of friction there, so you just have to overcome a little bit of the momentum. That's all.
So how many cars were there when you got there?
Oh, wow. I didn't count them, but it had to have been a good dozen, maybe more, maybe 10, 15, somewhere in there. And you had some that were just couples, but a lot of them were quads, a lot of double couples and that sort of thing. A lot of families. So that was cool.
So the bus was pretty full when you went back.
Actually, it was. I'd say, let's see, charter bus. I don't know how many passengers that holds, but I'd say it was a good 2/3, 3/4 full on the way back.
Yeah, I think a charter bus holds 50, 60 people, something like that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All in all, it sounds like a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, cool. I just need to find out where I can get one of these things so I can ride from my house up to the Essex steam train. That's only 4 miles. But that railroad's a bit more active. I might get myself into some trouble doing that if I tried it.
And it's called railexplorers.net. That's rail and the word explorers and then .net.
Yeah, check them out. It's I think it'd definitely be worth your while. Try and time the weather. And next time I think we're going to do it, we're going to do the south end. So we'll get the whole length of railroad under our belts. It's another way of getting some rare mileage.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? So I was looking at your Facebook page, the old Valley Local Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
And what's this thing on May 14th about Rapido trains?
Oh, the video.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. So some of y'all might know that one of my friends that lives up the road is Bill Schneider, and that's actually Bill and his wife Teresa, who went with us on the Rail Explorer. So a nice little segue there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he lives about 20 minutes up the road, and he doesn't have a layout right now. He had to dismantle his layout some years ago, and but they're building an addition on their house and built out the basement, and he's going to have a layout soon. Well, in another couple of years maybe, but in the meantime, he's layoutless. So whenever it comes time to do any promotional videos, a lot of times Jason Toronto, do stuff up around Toronto. I know that Bob Fallowfield has hosted some videos up on his railroad, but this time, Bill asked me if I'd be willing to have him come down and shoot the new FA2s on my railroad, and of course, so that's what that was all about. He came down, and it was kind of fun. We thought it was only going to take an hour or so. It ended up taking most of the afternoon, but it was a lot of fun running the trains. I'm just glad, since I've had a bit of a hiatus with the operating sessions lately, I'm glad everything ran okay. And yeah, it was a lot of fun trying to get the right angles. Lighting was a little bit of a challenge, but that video was all shot from his phone.
Really?
So yeah, so once I got a phone mount for my tripod that he was able to use. So some of the shots we were able to actually get the tripod out and use that. And the lighting on the railroad itself is pretty good, but sometimes trying to shoot a person with the railroad, they'll tend to be backlit. So it's a little bit of a challenge that way. But I think the video came out pretty good. It was fun to make.
So Bill was in it as well as the trains?
Yep. So he's one of their product people and does a lot of their artwork and stuff. And so I guess Rapido, they do a lot of videos of their products and try and get those out to promote the products and everything. So he was introducing the new FA2 and the new paint schemes and some of the features that the locomotives have, and having a layout to show them on, obviously, puts them in a good habitat. So, it's nice to have a little bit of scenery that, they can go through and you can see how they operate and hear how they operate because they've got the look sound decoders in them and all the lighting features and all that. So he wanted to show them off and wanted a good place to show them off and thought, the layout would be a good place to do that. So
yeah. And Bill Schneider works full time for Rapido, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
So, and how'd you meet him?
Ooh, how did I meet him? Well, I'm going into the Wayback Machine. I'd heard of him back when he had his New York, Ontario, and Western layout, and had seen him in the magazines and that sort of thing. And I knew that he lived in Connecticut, but I wasn't sure where. And at that time, I think he was working for Branchline in East Hartford. And so I met Ted Collada around the same time. He had gotten into cycling. This was back in the early 2000s, maybe 2003, 2004. And Ted knew Bill really well and said that he was having an operating session and, invited me along to the operating session. So that's how I met him, was at one of his op sessions. And, we hit it off. We have a very similar philosophy as far as modeling goes, wanting to have our layouts be a time capsule and really trying to follow the prototype as faithfully as we can, and having the art side come into it because you inevitably have to make compromises. So that's where you get the artistic side to try to figure out, okay, well, how can I best convey this scene, even though I have, only a fraction of the amount of space that I need to fit the scene, so how do you balance all that? And he's really, really good at that. So, and he also does all this, research, he knows, he was, one of the things that I remember him telling me about was the walkway beside one of the houses on his layout that he had to tear down. But he was telling me about the flagstones in the walkway and how he knew to use flagstones in that walkway because on one of his field trips out to the town, I forget it was Roscoe or Livingston Manor, New York, he had met an old timer that remembered the railroad, and so Bill was pumping him for all this information and for modeling purposes. And the guy made some sort of point of pointing out the fieldstone or flagstone walkway. And so Bill, it's one of the many details that Bill included on the layout that really enriched it, and obviously gives him something to share as far as the history goes and stuff. So he's trying to do that faithfully, and I'm trying to do the same thing with my Valley line. Although lately it's gotten to be a little bit more freelance because I'm relaxing some of the constraints a little bit, just because otherwise it's just going to drive me crazy. I'm never going to be able to accomplish anything if I have to
Yeah.
have it be absolutely perfect. So, it's got to be somewhere on the spectrum.
All right.
Well, in a manner of speaking.
I still want to investigate. I still want to investigate my theory of when we were talking about. I don't know what we were talking about. It was a podcast some time ago, and I said, people go nuts that the locomotives have to be just right with every nut and bolt in the right place, and they go nuts about cars that every rivet and nut and bolt has to be right in the right place, and they're pretty adamant about structures. But layouts get to be just freewheeling because you can't possibly make it to replicate.
Yeah, and that would be an excellent discussion or rabbit hole to go down, because it's absolutely true. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with what you're focused mainly on. I mean, the trains are the stars of the show, so obviously you want to invest some time and detail in that sort of thing. But the layout itself, Tony Custer, I think, is somebody that does it. I know others that have done the research, where Marty McGurk, I think, has done it as well, where they actually do the research and try and be just as fastidious with the scenery as they are with the trains that are rolling through the scenery. Like Tony Custer, I mean, there's this thing that I remember reading in one of his books or articles about researching the geology of the region that his trains were going through, so he'd be able to replicate just the right type of rock in the rock cuts and this and that. And that's when my brain starts to melt, because I can really appreciate that. And the level of attention to detail is profoundly impressive. But if I wanted to try and do that myself, I just don't think I would accomplish anything. I'd probably just hang it up and go back to the armchair, because it's about reach exceeding grasp. You're always trying to strive, and that's a good thing. But there's a tipping point, I think. And if your reach is always exceeding your grasp, on the one hand, you're stretching yourself and you're getting better and you're developing skill, and that's a good thing. And we ought to all, strive for that. But, there's a tipping point, I think, where if you stretch too much, too often, and don't ever grasp anything, it's just going to be frustrating, and you're going to, get into something else, because you're not going to be able to really do what it is you think you ought to be able to do. And a lot of times in model railroading, that happens too, especially when you're trying to model a prototype, or even if you're freelancing and you want to convey a certain look. I mean, I guess it must be what artists are frustrated about sometimes. They've got something in their mind's eye they want to get down on canvas or whatever, and they just can't get there. And, a lot of times what we have to remember is, you see things in the galleries, you see, model railroads in the magazines, that's, unless you were a prodigy or just freakishly good at things, that's the product of a lot of practice and a lot of time and a lot of doing that stretching. So I think with a lot of things, it's a balance. I mean, you want to stretch, you want to try and reach a bit, but you also want to accomplish some stuff too. And one of the challenges is trying to figure out where to strike that balance.
Is this a fair statement in the modern world of model, in the current world of model railroading, that people are desperate to have the locomotives just right, and there is no room for compromise? That also applies to freight cars on any rolling stock on the railroad. And then when it comes to buildings, people try to replicate them exactly, but some buildings are just too big, so you start to compromise on that. So buildings have a little bit more leeway, and then the layout, you just can't possibly put in the distance. So there's a huge compromise on the actual layout, but you try to mellow that down by trying to do the scenery just right.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that reflects what a lot of people where they set their priorities. But on the other hand, I'd say that a lot of it has to do with what's available. For example, you were talking about the structures, and Tichy is amazing. For example, they have all sorts of windows, all sorts of parts that you can use. But if you want to replicate a particular building perfectly, are you going to have the right size windows? You're going to have to scratch build them. Do you want to really scratch build, all the sashes and mullions for 37 windows on a particular building? Probably not. So, inevitably you figure, okay, well, that's a compromise I can make. I mean, again, it's where your priorities are.
Yeah.
But I think that with regard to the rolling stock and the engines, what you're finding is because so much of that is being done so well for you already. Obviously you're paying for it. I mean, it's a bit more expensive than in years gone by, but you're getting so much value in the detail, the rolling stock and the engines. And at the same time, those same folks, a lot of them, I think, and sometimes I veer toward this myself. You're concentrating so much on the locomotives and the cars and the detail, the right of way and all those details. That you can't possibly, to your point, replicate the entire railroad or even an entire scene. So what are you seeing happening in the hobby, I think, is a narrowing of focus and an increase in a corresponding increase in detail and attention to detail. So, for example, I mean, I know that we talk a lot about on the AML about Scott Thornton's protothrottle.
Right.
You're talking about now you're paying attention to super detailing your operations. It's not just running the engine back and forth and making a good coupling. It's sitting there for a little bit of time to pump up the air brakes. It's, checking out the indents on the protothrottle, making sure you're in the right notch when you notch up. It's, being able to brake well because now you've got that capability in the decoders to do that. And so I think more and more in the hobby, and I don't want to overstate it because there's certainly people that are still building big layouts, but I think part of what you're seeing in the trend in the hobby is narrowing the focus more and more because there's so much rich detail in the locomotives and cars. It demands rich detail in the right of way, in the surrounding scenery. And if you can't have the time or the money or the resources to bring that level of detail to a 1,200 square foot basement, maybe you can on a module or a 12-foot long shelf with staging off each side and really, super detailed things. I mean, even down to doing joint bars if you want. Jim Lincoln talks about in some of his clinics about, how he does the joint bars, and there's usually somebody, saying, well, why are you bothering with that? He's like, well, you look at the detail on the locomotive, there's details on the locomotive that you're going to pay attention to and see that are a lot smaller than a joint bar. And he likes to put up a photograph of a section of track from 300 feet away. He's like, can you see the joint bars? You say, you're good for, 3-foot rule, but in 3 feet, you see those joint bars. Now, you can decide not to put them in, and that's his point too. You can say, that you don't want to do them, and that's fine. But don't say you can't see them, and don't have that be the reason you're not doing them, because you can see them. Maybe you just choose not to do them, but they're there. Right. And I think on a smaller layout, you can actually do that.
Yeah.
You'd have the time to do it.
Well, we just interviewed a fella by the name of Chris Brimley, who's the vice president over there at ExactRail. And he has a 1 foot by 7 foot end scale layout called the Hudson Terminal Railway, which was just on the cover of RMC, the May edition of Railroad Model Craftsman.
Oh, okay. I saw that. I didn't know it was in scale. Wow.
I know. It's spectacular, isn't it?
It really is.
And of course, the editor, we all know the editor there is Otto Vondrak, our very own Otto Vondrak.
Yeah, nice to have family in the business.
Yeah, and his father's name is Ed, but it's not that Ed. It's a different Ed.
Right.
But he only has a 1 foot by 7 foot layout, and he'll have 6 guys over to operate it.
Oh, that's awesome. And you can do that when you're paying attention to the operations prototypically. I mean, you can keep yourself busy. I mean, there's I don't know if it's Lance Minheim or Pele Solberg or who it was, but they're doing this one turnout thing.
Yeah,
and
that was Lance Minheim.
Oh, okay. So, at first you think, really, one turnout you can do that? Well, the short answer is yes, but you have to pay very close attention to what the prototype would do in order to get the enjoyment out of that. To be able to do all the steps that they would do, and then you can actually spend a good amount of time working just one turnout. And one of the things I'm going to try and highlight on my blog, maybe over the summer into the fall, is I've got this, and you may recall seeing it, off the main line in Middletown. There's a branch up to the town of East Berlin on my railroad. And even on the prototype, there was no runaround. So the train would back all the way from Middletown to East Berlin. It's something like 5 or 6 miles. And they would back the train caboose first all the way to the end of the line. And there was only one turnout at the end of the line. It serviced chemical paint place there. It was just one turnout, but I've operated that branch, prototypically, and you go up there, you can only have a certain number of cars because of the capacities at the end of the line. But with just one turnout, it keeps me busy for 40, 45 real minutes, trying to swap all the cars around and getting everything back in order and the caboose on the end and all that jazz and head back down the line. Put staging off that, you could do that in, 8 feet, 8 feet on a shelf, 6 feet on a shelf, and it's no problem at all. And talk about detail, you'd have detail in your scene to match the level of detail in your cars and locomotives.
And you have one particular branch line where it's all trailing points, is it not?
Oh, yeah. Well, the line from
it just made me think of it when you said the one turnout thing. But you have a branch line on your railroad where it's all is it trailing points? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's facing points northbound. So
right.
So that's what makes it complicated. So yeah, our very own Kaylee Zing first alerted me to the need for some conductor's notes to tell first-time operators about that, because you go from Old Saybrook up to East Haddam, and on the model as well as on the prototype, you've got Essex, which has a good size. Well, I don't want to say yard, but there's a couple of double-ended sidings and some plenty of real estate. You can move cars around and you can run around there. But north of Essex, going northbound all the way to East Haddam, all of the switches are facing point. So what you've got to do is you basically you do all your switching in Essex, and then you go up to the end of the. It's not the end of the line, but it's the end of the operating distance of this particular local. Goes up to East Haddam, where there's a runaround up there. You swap cars with the local that comes from the north there in East Haddam, and then you work the sidings back on your way back because it's a turn. So the train goes up to East Haddam and then does what it has to do there, and then on the way back it services the town of Deep River on the way back, because those are facing point going northbound, trailing point southbound. But boy, if you don't know that going into it, you're like, how the heck am I supposed to get these cars around? Because there's no run around in Deep River. So
yeah, Kaylee was so mad that there wasn't the proper notes about that.
I corrected it the very next session.
She's still yelling at me about it, and I'm like, I wasn't even there. What are you yelling at me for?
Well, I guess it made an impression.
It seems like you're being quite active on the layout lately.
Well, it's funny because it's my busiest time of year at work by far, and I've got 8 days. I've got 8 session days left, and it's actually a week and a half because we end midnight on June 5th. It's the reason I can't make it to the proto meet to NERPM. Excuse me.
Yeah. All right. Before you go on, give people a really short description of what it is you do.
Oh, for my day job?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm an attorney for the legislature. I guess that's the shortest way of putting it. Connecticut Legislature, Connecticut General Assembly. I'm an attorney there, and we have a part-time legislature, but it's a full-time job because in the off session I do research and help legislators with constituent work and that sort of thing. But
so when it's in session, you have to be there to answer questions and write correct, shark fin bylaws.
Yeah, shark fin bills. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, according to our Constitution, it's part-time legislature, and in odd-numbered years, it's the long session because it's the session that follows the election, which is in the even-numbered years. So in the odd-numbered years, we're in session from January to June, and in the short session, even-numbered years, we're in session from February to May. So every other year, I can go to NERPM, but this year is not one of those years, so I'm missing it next weekend. But it's a busy time at work, and there's lots of long hours. Not complaining. It's predictable. I know it's going to happen, at the same point about every year. But, the older I get, the less patient I am with 31-hour days. So
yeah, do you have some couch in your office or something that you could take a nap or?
No. We had a debate on a bill a couple weeks ago. I went in 8:30 Wednesday morning. I didn't get home until 1:30 Thursday afternoon.
Wow.
And the debate went right through the night. It was one of the bills that I was responsible for, so I was there throughout the night. And no, you're you're up all night. The debate was going on, and they had questions. We're doing amendments, and so that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, that is that happens maybe twice, 3 times a session, but it usually happens during these last 6 weeks of sessions. So it gets very busy. So the layout, as far as operating sessions and stuff like that goes, has been on hiatus. But there was a combination of 2 events that kind of created a perfect storm in a good way for me in the layout. 3 things. One is the weather has been really lousy up until this last week, but for a few weeks stretch there, every morning it was raining. So I wasn't doing my morning rides like I would normally do.
Right.
So, but I would still be getting up that early because, that my body's used to doing that. And at the same time, I visited, I got some buildings from a guy who's retiring, and I'll be detailing that more on my blog, but he and his wife are moving into assisted living, and he was an amazing lone wolf modeler. And me and Bill Schneider and a couple other friends of ours went to help him dismantle the layout and got some structures off his layout that were just amazing. And that's what I was alluding to before when I said I'm letting the prototype rigidity, loosen just a little bit, because a couple of these buildings, I had to use them. And I don't care if they're not perfectly correct for East Berlin, for example. They look great, and it's a legacy to him. And so I had these buildings that I needed to place. I had this weather that wasn't cooperating with bike riding, and so put the things together. And instead of going out on my bike before work in the morning, I've got about an hour or so, maybe an hour and 15 minutes in the morning before work that I can work on the layout. So that's what I've been doing, and been trading my morning ride photos for morning layout progress photos on the Facebook page. So and it's really fun because trying to place these buildings. I mean, it's not. It's kind of more in my wheelhouse as far as what I am good at. Well, I don't want to say good at in the hobby, but what I'm less intimidated by. That I've got this thing about scenery that I've been intimidated by, and trying to get to that. But building some extra bench work, moving a backdrop so I can, expand the scene a little bit to accommodate a really great building. I mean, adhesives, clamps, wood, glue, I'm all over it. I can build out the layout, and that's what I've been doing a little bit. Getting the foam board out, because there's these, I use open, L-girder bench work and sub road bed. So there's a lot of areas that aren't covered. And so you can't, put buildings out in midair, so they have to sit on something. So I'm, backfilling some of these big gaps with some foam board, and it's 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, really easy mentally, very, very easy. Not a lot of thinking involved. I've got a lot of practice doing that sort of work. So, so I've been doing that and making some pretty good progress on the layout. I mean, Middletown, you're going to start seeing, is starting to build out a bit, because I got a bunch of city buildings off this layout. So Middletown is going to actually start looking like a city, and that's pretty cool. East Berlin, that one turnout area at the end of the branch line I was talking about, that scene is really coming together nicely. There's 2 beautiful buildings that I've placed there, and they just fit nice. They look great. It's a little bit freelance, but I'm still going to call it Stanley Chemical, and it's the rule number 1. It's my railroad, right? So
absolutely,
so they're going to look good, and it's really been energizing, because I really appreciate rigid prototype modeling and doing everything to the nines. Whether it's Jack Burgess or Bill Schneider or Tony Custer, any of these guys. But sometimes you risk losing a little bit of that magic in the hobby that you might have first really experienced when you first got into it. When you didn't know so much, about everything.
That's what makes the hobby so great, because I've never had any interest in modeling a prototype, never, ever. And I've always enjoyed modeling freelance prototype, but I like picking an era. I like picking a location and making the era and the location seem realistic, so it all seems realistic. But I've never had any interest in doing prototype modeling.
Well, I put you up there in Allegheny Lackawanna Southern up there. Well, not that one, but what was the name of the Erie Railroad?
Allegheny Lackawanna.
Oh, so I did have it right.
Yeah.
So I put that up there with the V&O,
yep.
Tony Custer's layout, or his first one, the Allegheny Midland, or even Mike Confalone's layout. I mean, these things where you've got, you convey the scene and the era and everything, it's almost more realistic than real.
Yeah, yeah. Like I wasn't a research guy. It's not something I enjoy. So it's like, and I don't like people pointing out to me because I know I'm not gonna get it exactly right, and there'd be people saying you didn't do this or you didn't do that, and I'd be like, you know what, I'm my favorite example is your favorite. You think of your favorite movie 90,000 times out of a bazillion, it's going to be a fictional movie.
Yep.
Well,
I mean, it's, do you want to watch a documentary or do you want to watch good historical fiction?
Yeah.
Do you want, documentary, the best ones, you get the Ken Burns, you get the, whoever, sure. They do a great job, and it's all perfect, and it's all, all prototype, if you will. But, give me something, like High Noon with Gary Cooper. Something that's, okay, it's based on the era and time, and, or It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, that's not prototype, but boy, talk about something that speaks to you, right?
Well,
it's what you're talking about.
And it's the only reason I was saying that is because you said you were, slipping a little bit, you're relaxing the rules a little bit, and so that's the only reason I brought that up.
Yeah.
Because on the other side of the coin, I very much am in awe of people that model a prototype and get it right, like you and Tom Jacobs and these fellas that, want to model a prototype and get it right. I think that's cool too. So that's, again, why the hobby is so exciting for everybody, because there's a niche for everybody.
It really is. I mean, the variety and breadth of what you can get into is, amazing. I mean, it sounds, like we're repeating a lot of ourselves, but it's because it's so true. I mean, whether you're into electronics or carpentry or detailing or painting or art or history, I mean, it really does touch on so many different things. I mean, and requires so many different things, requires you to develop so many different skills. I mean, that's one of the things that makes it so compelling.
Yeah, and I actually have come to believe that I think Al Gore invented the internet strictly for model railroaders.
Boy, you could sit there on the internet and just have, just spend all the time in the world going through the photos that are up there and the videos that are up there. It's amazing.
Well, and when I was talking to Chris Brimley, I mean, we were talking, and he's met so many people over the last 4 or 5 years through the internet, and it's like you and I have connected through the internet. It gives the hobby did not lend itself to mingling, and the internet lends itself to mingling electronically, which is what model railroaders really like to do anyway.
Right.
So,
well, it's kind of sad, this guy that, well, not sad, but it's just how things go. I mean, he's moving into, assisted living, and he's been this lone wolf modeler, and I'm thinking, well, how would his modeling, or how would things have been different if you just shifted things forward 10 years?
Yeah.
And if he had gotten into the internet and had, really engaged that way. I mean, he gets on I know that he gets on my blog, so I know he has access to the internet. That's how he knew that I did this stuff. And he came to one of my open houses. I had actually met him back a couple of years ago, and had heard about his layout, and that he had built some prototype buildings from the area. They weren't rail served, but they were prototype buildings from the area that he had built. But again, lone wolf modeler, and so many of those have been so prevalent in the hobby. And now, like to your point, with the internet and social media and being able to get out and share, okay, you could still be technically a lone wolf modeler. I mean, if you're in, somewhere in the wilds of Saskatchewan or something, all by yourself in a cabin up on a lake somewhere, and still be part of the community, because you're able to share through either social media or on a website or through YouTube or whatever. And now you're connected. Now you're part of it. And now your modeling is going to get better. You're going to meet a lot of different people, get different insights and techniques and skills, or just, shoot the breeze, because that's a cool thing to do.
Well, to me, I think one of the greatest aspects of model railroading, and I'm sure it exists in other hobbies, but I'm not so sure it exists to the level that it does in model railroading, is it's the only way a lawyer for the Connecticut State Legislature and a redneck living north of Toronto would get together and become fast friends, because society just tends to lend itself to, keeping people in their own queue. And you can have, if you've got a world famous brain surgeon that's trying to model an SD35 from the Mopac, and he meets a guy that's a good family man that drives a UPS truck in Florida, and the two guys are modeling the same thing. They'll become fast friends. They'll become friends forever.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, again, that could be the subject of all of their podcasts. But I got to tell you, one of the things, and not to go down the rabbit hole, but you had mentioned a little bit about it earlier, how the world's gone crazy. I think a big part of that is because everybody's just talking to themselves, and by that I mean they're talking to other people that are exactly like them. They're not getting out and talking to anybody else. And back, I don't want to say I'm old, but back in the old days, maybe you would talk to your neighbors, and maybe your neighbors aren't doing the same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
But in model railroading, I mean, I've got friends, all across the political spectrum. I've got, a wide diversity of backgrounds and professions and everything. And the common thread, it sounds a little corny, but the common thread of our love for the railroad is, kind of that tie that binds. And, something, it can transcend a lot of this other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But the important thing is that because of that, and you have that connection that's on something that you're both passionate about, you cut each other the sort of slack that we used to cut each other. Again, I don't want to sound old, but back in the old days, I mean, when people, live and let live. Okay, that's your perspective. That's fine. I don't need to hate you. I don't need to say that you're crazy or stupid. And that's where the best conversations happen. And frankly, I think that's where the best, politics and best society happens, is because, people are talking to each other. And one of the things that is really disappointing and sad about how things appear to be developing is that people aren't talking to anybody that's different from them. Everybody is in an echo chamber and talking to other people and hearing the same stuff. And if you can sit down with that level of trust and affinity that you have because you share a passion for a hobby, maybe you listen to them a little bit and get the benefit of a different perspective. Maybe they listen to you a little bit, and get the benefit of a different perspective. And that's a good thing, because that's where the sharp, points in everybody gets, smoothed down a little bit. And that makes for a much nicer world, I think.
I think
didn't mean to get all philosophical.
No, but
it is a good point.
That's the point. That's one of the questions we've been searching ever since we did this podcast. Because as I've said to you, number one, we wouldn't have met had I not started this podcast, and we've become great friends. And we've talked about other things other than model railroading.
Yeah.
And I went to a hockey game there in Boston there a couple of months ago, and I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't started the podcast. And I went to see Joe, my buddy Joe, and I stayed at his place, and we went to the hockey game. And that Saturday, we're kind of sitting around going, well, what do we do? And then all of a sudden we thought, oh, hey, let's go see Bob Frischella on the north side of Boston. So we called him, and he was available. We went up there, and I mean, I said to Joe on the way back to the hockey game, I said, none of this would have existed 3 or 4 years ago without the podcast, and that wouldn't have existed without the internet. You've said it perfectly. It makes model railroad, the beauty of this digital world is model railroaders are more interested in being friends about the hobby than they are about being enemies about other things in life, other facets of life. And you've said it perfectly. You've said it perfectly. Because, I mean, you and I have come from two different walks of life and are going to be fast friends forever. And it's just,
absolutely.
Could you load me $20?
I'll take $5 and get you a nice gift.
Hey, yeah. Hey, you know what? Because of you, now I own 3 bicycles.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I love seeing those pictures of you get out on that. I think you said there's a trail by your house.
Yeah, in Florida. My house in Florida, I was coming back from the grocery store, and I looked to the left at this intersection, and there was a bike path there, and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, did they connect? Because in Florida, they're trying to make it you can do the whole state by bike path.
Oh, wow.
And I looked, and I went, holy mackerel. So I jumped on my bike, because I ride around the neighborhood.
Yep.
It used to be my favorite exercise. So I jumped on my bike, and the path goes for like 7 miles.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's even one part where you go up over a bridge and over the main line, the CSX main line. And
oh, perfect.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that is very, very cool.
So I ended up riding that for like 4 days like crazy, just for fun.
Nice.
And then I started feeling better, and I thought, I got to get a better bike for up here, up north. So then I went to see my buddy, Blair. And now there you go. You'll know that I'm just not picking this up all of a sudden, because Blair and I have been friends forever. He owns bike land. He's owned bike land as long as I've been in business in town. And I said, I got to get a new bike. So, yeah, you just end up making me spend like $1,000.
And yet I'm getting no commission at all.
Yeah. I think this was time
That's
well.
awesome.
Yeah, well, biking is you don't have to do it hard. You don't have to beat yourself to death.
Exactly.
You can just go along at a nice pace, and you're going to get a ton of exercise. Yep,
good exercise is good cardio, low impact, so it's easy on your joints. You get to see the scenery go by, wind in your hair. It's great until it starts raining. And get the rooster tail up your back. That's not so great. But
so look, what did we do? I think we killed an hour here. Look at that, we killed a
Did
whole
we
hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. I thought we were only going to be on the phone for 5 minutes.
I know. But look at that. That's how cool this podcast is. This podcast was a really bad idea. I should have never started it.
Yeah, it's really not going very well at all.
No.
Yeah.
But that's another one. I saw you post those pictures. I thought, we got to talk about that, because that'll be really interesting, and it's something we can talk about in person. So now this year, I don't think I'm going to make it to NERPM, because that's in a week from when we're talking.
Yes.
And on Thursday, I'm going to be riding the Hiawassee excursion train as a guest of scaletrains.com.
Oh, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so I was invited to go do that.
Very cool. You got to post some pictures.
I will. So I'm going to interview, and I think I'll stick my microphone in front of people's faces and interview some people, so that'll be fun.
Very cool.
Then I thought I'd hit it on the way home, but it's like 800 miles from Tennessee.
Yeah, that's not really on the way.
No.
Well, it's funny you're going to be in Tennessee, because I'm actually going to fly down to see my dad for Father's Day. I'm going down there for a week after session's over, so we'll be passing each other in a sense, but
that's cool.
Yeah, so I'll be down there for a little bit.
Do something interesting, and we'll talk about that too.
I'll see what I can do.
Wait till you hear the audio. This sounds great on your phone with the headset you got. This sounds beautiful.
Fantastic, because I know it was either the first or second time I was using this headset, and I know it wasn't sounding so great, and I knew it had to be something I was doing wrong, because I know everybody else that has the same headset, they sound amazing.
Yeah.
So I'll just have to make sure that I do this exact same thing next time.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you a question that I know I'm going to be asking a lot of people over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And it's way off topic, but I'm gonna start asking you, and then I'm gonna do virtual hobby shop tomorrow, so I'll ask all those guys. So during the last week, the ABC had 2 live performances of All in the Family and the Jefferson shows from back in the 70s that were very famous and made an impact during those times.
Yeah.
And I watched them, and I had I wasn't a big fan of All in the Family for 20, 30 years. I watched them first time through. And I thought Archie Bunker was kind of annoying and blah, blah, blah. So I watched this live episode, and I thought, that's kind of neat. So I watched 3 or 4 of them on 3 or 4 of the original episodes on YouTube. And then I'm sitting there watching them, and I'm thinking, I'm kind of like Archie Bunker.
Well, who's Meathead?
Yeah, that's a good question. And everybody I've said that to, they've either laughed like you or they've agreed wholeheartedly.
Well, laughing can be ambiguous, right?
Well, exactly. or a safe answer.
Safe response.
Yeah.
Just laugh.
Yeah. Fortunately, I'm not racist like Archie or any of those things, but they were doing one show about hippies, and I can remember yelling at my kid at the way he was yelling. I'm thinking, damn, I'm just like Archie Bunker. Only maybe slightly more educated or something.
Well, I mean, there's again, not with the bad side of all that, but there is a virtue in speaking your mind and just being right out with it and upfront and honest.
Yeah.
no matter what it takes, and no matter what the ramifications.
Yeah. And I think we can all agree, all of us in the AML Nation can all agree that, and I wholeheartedly support this notion that if we all did things my way, we'd all be a lot happier.
I think we would all. Well, what can I say?
Yeah. You know what? We'll put this at the end of a thing. So we're gonna do the email address and the rest of the stuff. So Can you do the email address?
Yeah, I think so. I should know, with or without A.
Yeah, without A.
Okay, got it. So yes, I can.
All right, go.
Okay, it's if you want to contact us by the form of email, you can contact Modeler's Life at modelerslife@gmail.com. That's Modeler's Life with one L like Lionel. Well, actually, that's two L's.
Yeah.
One L like railroad, not two L's like Lionel.
There you go. You're kind of sounding like Bruce Kelly there for a while.
Is that a bad thing?
Yeah, well, it's Kelly. What can I tell you?
Oh, that's true.
And we have a website, modelerslife.com. If you go there, you'll see all sorts of interesting links and stuff. And you're supposed to send me a paragraph and a picture so I can put it up.
Oh, right. Yes, I do have that on my list. I will get that to you as soon as I can.
All right. And rattle Kaylee's chain, too, because I want her to do that.
Oh, okay. I will do that.
And, yeah, this year we're going to have to do the NERPM. Excuse me. We're going to have to do that with Joe Cummings and Kaylee this year, the review, I guess.
Absolutely, and that'll be very, very cool.
Yeah. And, yeah, so we got the website. And now the last part. Can you handle the last part?
What's that?
All right. Well, you know what? We'll just do it. We'll do it off the cuff and see how you do. Because I know you listen to the podcast.
I think I know where this is going.
All right. So remember, a modeler's life is considered marginally adequate by 6 out of 10
rail explorers.
Temperatures rising, got my foot on the floor. Crazy people talking like I wanna have more. Let me hear it, baby, cause I know what you got. You got it, baby. This place is hot and out. So glad you made it.
Transportation for AML guests provided by Diamond Limousine. Diamond Limousine, where all of our vehicles are true diamonds in the rough.
It's another Lincoln Homer.